Good morning and welcome again as we continue our discussion about the journey that we're all on, this spiritual growth that we're all pursuing. I talked about yesterday how that there are really three events that take place in the life of everyone who is truly born again. The first one is that we are justified. That means declared to be in a right relationship, and that happens when we're born again of the Spirit in Jesus Christ. That's followed by a second event called sanctification, which really is that process by which God separates us from our old life and begins to retrain us in His holiness. And that's a lifelong process. And that process will continue to the very end. In other words, you'll never reach any kind of spiritual moral perfection in this life. But what we do know is that one day God will bring that perfection through the third thing called glorification, which means when we leave this world and we enter into the presence of God, where Paul said in 1 Corinthians 13 that we will be like Him because we will see Him as He is. And so as we behold His glory, we will be really transformed into that identical glory and will live and reign with Christ for all eternity. But what I want to really focus on as we continue is that middle part, once again, called that process of sanctification. And in a way, I like to refer to it as the journey that every one of us are on, because it's something that really obviously consumes a lot of our thought and energy in this present world as we seek to live out the reality of our salvation. One term or one way it's often expressed is that positionally we're in Christ, but conditionally we're still in sin. So here I have the Christ nature that's living inside of me, and yet as I seek to live my life, I have to really express it through this barrier, if you will, called my flesh, that I'm trying to express through my fleshly man the person of Jesus Christ into the world. And it's really bypassing that fleshly nature that becomes the great challenge of the Christian life. And so what I wanted to say is that there are really three phases to that journey. And the first thing, like any journey, has a beginning. And I think that it's in the beginning that many people actually get stalled. I'm reminded of 1 King chapter 18 where Elijah is talking to the people of Israel, and he just simply asks them a question. He says, if the Lord, that is Yahweh, is God, is the true God, if the God of Israel is the true God, then worship Him. But if Baal, the god of the Sidonians, and the god of Jezebel and Ahab, if that's the real God, then we should worship Baal. But he says, how long will you halt or limp between two opinions? In other words, the word that's used there in the original literally means to hobble along. In other words, you're not really making any real progress. It's kind of like you're trying to drag your legs behind you as you pull yourself forward with your arms. And the reason is because you're not really committed enough to stand up on your own 2 feet and to begin to walk by faith. And that's really why the beginning of the journey is really, really significant. Because obviously, if we don't begin, we won't make any progress whatsoever. And yet, I find that a lot of Christians struggle with this point of beginning. In other words, they've asked Christ into their heart, and it was a true moment of conversion. And then they get kind of what Paul referred to as being staggered by unbelief. In other words, there's just something that fearfully stands out there. And I know that for me, it kind of happened the other way. Before I became a Christian, I really struggled with making the commitment, not because I didn't want to. I really did. I wanted to have the weight of sin taken off my life, and yet I was afraid of what it would cost me. I was afraid of the sacrifices I would have to make. I mean, I was like so many saying, God, don't make me a missionary and send me to the Congo or someplace in Africa where they have mosquitoes and I'd contract malaria. No, in fact, the reality was I discovered that not only has God already sent missionaries there, and there are probably a higher percentage of Christians in Africa today than there are in the U.S., the simple reality was that I had to be willing to completely surrender my life. It's what Paul referred to in Romans 12 as present your body as a living sacrifice. That wholly giving over of myself to God and saying, Lord, your will be done, your kingdom come in my life. That let there be really, as it is in heaven, let it be also true in my life here upon the earth. That I'm living, in other words, in constant agreement with your heavenly will and your heavenly desire. Now again, I don't do that all that well, and I'm sure you'll feel the same way, that we all fall short, we all slip up and make mistakes. But even though we have these dips in our journey, as long as the graph is going up, then we're moving in the right direction. The danger is we don't even get started, or if we get started, then we go back to the beginning because of fear and unbelief. Fear is the biggest challenge for most of us. And I would even guess that today, some of you are thinking about spiritual choices and decisions you need to make. And you're thinking to yourself, but if I do that, what is the choice? I mean, for example, you can be in a position where the employer is requiring you or telling you you have to do something that really is against your conscience, or is illegal or dishonest, and you're struggling with it. I mean, I've known people in very important and significant positions who have slipped up at this point, where they were so afraid of losing their income and their position that they really compromised their faith and came later on to regret it, because God will honor us. He honors those who honor him. He blesses us even if it looks like it's going to be dangerous and scary. And so what we want, maybe I can kind of bring this to a close, but I just really want to get us focusing in on this one thing about we're called by God into a journey. The moment you come to Christ, your life becomes a journey towards heaven. And the biggest thing is starting out, because if we don't start, we'll never make any progress at all. Fear keeps us from reaching out. And so I just challenge you today to really take a moment and think, what is the one thing in my life that's holding me back and hindering my forward progress? And then ask God to help you break free from that bondage and experience a greater freedom in Christ. So I'm going to wrap it up here, but again, I'll pick this up tomorrow as we continue to talk about walking with Jesus, essentially.